Welcome to True Echo, where forgotten voices rise, silent talents roar, and stories pierce deeper than applause. Today, we bring you a tale that isn't just about music. It's about memory, prejudice, soul, and the power of one woman who turned a broken piano into a revolution. What happens when a black CEO is mocked on a stage she was never allowed to dream of? This isn't just about a performance. It's about survival, legacy, and the kind of music that no conservatory can teach. Stay until the final note, because what she played changed everything. The first time Monica Harris walked into the Stratford Conservatory, she wasn't there as a student, speaker, or donor. She wasn't listed on any program, didn't wear a badge, and had no business cards in hand. She simply walked in, a black woman in her late 40s, wrapped in a light gray coat, low-heeled shoes scuffed from years of walking boardroom hallways, and a silence that clung to her like perfume. It was 7:12 a.m. The glass doors of the grand auditorium groaned softly as she slipped inside, the polished marble floor echoing her footsteps like a quiet heartbeat. No one noticed her. Or rather, they saw her but didn't see her. One young violinist looked up briefly, saw her muted attire, and muttered, "Maintenance usually comes later." Monica didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her eyes were locked on the Steinway Model D grand piano, the most expensive, coveted instrument on campus. Under the soft amber lights that filtered through the domed ceiling, the piano gleamed like an untouched relic. She took a step forward, then another, her breath hitching slightly as though approaching something sacred. 30 years. That's how long it had been since her hands last touched real ivory. Back then, she was 18. A girl from South Atlanta with a partial scholarship to Minor Hill Music Academy, a gift for blues and gospel chords, and a mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep the heat on. She remembered sitting up late, scribbling melodies on diner napkins, practicing on a chipped electric keyboard they bought secondhand. Music was her first language. But survival demanded fluency in another, one where dreams came second to bills. The morning the hospital said her mother wouldn't make it, Monica made a choice. She sold her electric guitar, declined her scholarship, and picked up shifts at a laundromat. Music had to die so her mother could have morphine. Years passed. Monica fought her way into business, founded Artium Holdings, a billion-dollar arts education company, and spoke before presidents. But through all of it, she had never touched a piano again. Until now. Her fingers hovered above the closed lid of the Steinway like they were remembering a forgotten prayer. She didn't play. Not yet. Just traced the surface slowly, like touching a scar. Then came the voice. "Hey, you want to play? This piano isn't for dusting." She turned. A tall, perfectly polished young man stood with his arms crossed. Platinum blonde hair, custom academy blazer, leather shoes reflecting stage lights. His name tag read, Blake Reynolds. The son of Marshall Reynolds, a major donor whose name was etched into the conservatory's marble wall. Blake didn't ask who Monica was. He didn't need to. He had already decided. "You know, the tech department has a keyboard in the sound room. Just saying, to avoid scratches." Monica smiled faintly. She knew that tone well, condescension wrapped in casual courtesy. She had heard it from investors questioning her credentials, from hotel clerks who assumed she couldn't afford the executive suite, and from board members who complimented her eloquence like it was surprising. Before she could reply, a quieter voice entered the room. "Are you Monica Harris, CEO of Artium Holdings?" It was Jordan Lee, a young security officer standing awkwardly in the hallway, holding a clipboard. His voice faltered slightly as he realized what he had just done in front of Blake. But Monica held up a hand gently. "I'm here as a music lover," she whispered. "Let it stay that way." Blake raised an eyebrow. "You know her?" Jordan hesitated, then shook his head. "Thought I did. Guess I was wrong." The comment was enough for Blake to smirk and saunter toward the piano. He placed a hand on the polished lid and wiped a pretend smudge. "Fingerprints," he said, glancing sideways at Monica. "You know, not everyone gets to touch this piano." Monica looked him in the eye. Her voice was soft but sharp. "A piano is for playing. Not just for admiring." Blake's smirk twitched. "Are you a teacher?" "I used to be a student," she said calmly, then lowered the lid of the piano like closing a book. Blake gave a short laugh. "One of those, I almost made it, stories. We hear a lot of those around here." Jordan stiffened, his clipboard now gripped tight enough to bend. But Monica didn't flinch. She simply looked at Blake with a gaze that said, "I've faced much worse than you, and survived." "Mr. Reynolds," she said with deliberate politeness, "maybe when you can play a piece that makes others go silent to listen, you'll understand. No one truly owns a piano. The only one it belongs to is the person who can awaken it." Blake's mouth opened, but before he could speak, a staff member called him away to a practice session. Monica turned back to the piano. Her hand rested briefly on the lid, then dropped to her side. But inside her chest, something had shifted. A spark had been struck, the kind that doesn't make you angry, just ready. For the first time in 30 years, she heard the middle C key ring out in her mind. Not just as sound, but as memory. In a smoky jazz bar called Blue Lantern, an old pianist with nicotine-stained fingers once taught her to play with her ears, not her eyes. "It's not about the right notes, kid," he had said. "It's about saying something that can't be said." Her mother used to sit beside her, tapping along softly, whispering, "You're not just playing music, Monica. You're speaking your heart." Back then, Monica thought losing music meant losing her voice. But maybe, just maybe, it was only locked away. And someone had just handed her the key. Monica didn't leave the conservatory right away. Instead, she walked to the back of the auditorium and sat in the final row, the one no one ever chose unless they were hiding. Her hands rested lightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the stage where the Steinway now sat behind thin red curtains, obscured like a secret too powerful to touch. She didn't know how long she sat there, but time felt suspended. For once in her life, she wasn't rushing to a boardroom, wasn't drafting reports or reviewing budgets. She was simply present. Footsteps echoed again. Not Blake this time, but Jordan Lee, the young security guard. He moved carefully, as if not wanting to disturb something sacred. He sat beside her in silence. "You know what's happening tomorrow?" he finally asked. Monica didn't turn. "Saturday." Jordan chuckled softly. "The Whitmore Invitational Qualifiers. Right here. 9 a.m. Monica tilted her head slightly, curious. "I'm not exactly audition material." Jordan didn't laugh. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He passed it to her. "A wild card application," he said. "Submissions close today. 6 p.m. She took the form slowly. It felt like a joke at first, like some cosmic prank to remind her she didn't belong. She glanced over the lines: name, background, qualifications, piece to be performed. "I'm a CEO," she said softly. "I haven't played formally since I was a teenager. I don't have sheet music. I don't even know what I'd play." Jordan leaned forward, elbows on knees. "But you do play," he said. That moment earlier, it wasn't performance. It was survival. Monica didn't reply. But her hand gripped the paper tighter. Jordan nodded, more to himself than to her. "You don't need a resume. You already speak the language. Just don't let the gatekeepers tell you it's not valid." He stood up slowly and walked away. Monica remained still, staring at the form in her hand. What would she even play? Her mind drifted back to a hospital room where her mother had lain pale and small in the bed. Monica had brought her electric piano in and played something, a piece she had made up on the spot, a slow, sorrowful melody that matched the sound of her mother's labored breathing. There were no sheet notes. No title. Just feeling. That melody had never left her. Maybe it was time to bring it back. By late afternoon, Monica returned to her apartment, a modest space in Cambridge with creaky wooden floors and a bookshelf filled with leadership tomes. In the corner, hidden beneath a faded quilt, sat a chipped Casio keyboard. She hadn't touched it in over a decade. She uncovered it slowly, running her hands over the black plastic like a long-lost friend. When she powered it on, a harsh buzz filled the room. One of the speakers crackled. A few keys stuck. But it still sang. Her fingers hovered above the keys, then began to search. Not for perfection. Just for truth. She played the memory. That piece from her mother's bedside. It came out broken at first, unsure, limping, but then her hands remembered. The melody returned, shapeless and raw, like smoke curling from an old fire. It wasn't classical. It wasn't jazzy. It wasn't even finished. But it was hers. She spent hours weaving together fragments. Pieces she'd hummed in board meetings. Rhythms that came to her in the silence after everyone had gone home. Scars, turned into sound. She scribbled the notes down on blank paper, not proper notation, just memory markers. Blue lament. Rain on window. Mama's last breath. At 5:42 p.m., Monica stood in front of the conservatory's administration desk. Her coat collar was pulled up against the wind, her hair pinned in a tight knot. She handed the application form to Meredith Clark, the competition coordinator. Meredith scanned the page, then raised an eyebrow. Original composition? Monica nodded. No conservatory affiliation? Nope. Do you have sheet music? Monica smiled. Just what's in here. She tapped her chest. There was an awkward silence. A male student nearby snorted softly. Probably plays Beethoven on Excel, he whispered. Monica didn't respond. Not with words. But the way she stood, chin high, back straight, said she wasn't here for anyone's permission. Meredith nodded coolly. You'll be the last performer tomorrow. Monica turned and walked to the waiting area. Every eye in the room seemed to follow her. Some curious, some amused, others already dismissive. She was too old. Too unknown. Too uncredentialed. But as she sat alone in the corner, she felt none of it. She wasn't there to impress. She was there to speak. And her voice was a piano. The next morning, the conservatory was drenched in the soft gray light of Boston's autumn. The marble steps glistened with mist as Monica Harris returned, not as a visitor, but as a wild card. 8:12 a.m. She arrived early. Not because she wanted to prepare. But because this wasn't just an audition, it was a reckoning. Her gray coat was buttoned neatly, her brown leather bag slung over one shoulder, frayed at the edges. No makeup. No performance shoes. Just Monica. Whole. Unfiltered. Inside the waiting area, students sat in carefully pressed suits and satin dresses. They whispered in clusters, swapping practice routines and last-minute scale warm-ups. Monica sat alone on a bench against the wall, her wild card slot already turning heads. A boy in a tuxedo leaned over to his friend. Think she's someone's mom? Another girl whispered, or maybe the CFO of a label. I heard this competition brings scouts. Someone else laughed. She's definitely not a performer. No one brings a handwritten application unless they're here to make a statement. Preston Caldwell, dressed in a custom black tux with a red silk handkerchief, turned to her. Let me guess, jazz improvisation. Or something. Deep? Monica met his eyes. No. Just truth. His smirk faltered. That answer didn't fit into any category he was trained to compete against. At 8:58 a.m., the first contestant was called. One by one, the names were read. Each performance lasted precisely 8 minutes. Judges scribbled notes, nodded politely, offered formal critiques. There was applause, but never emotion. Skill without soul. Hours passed. Monica didn't move. She watched the door. She listened. But not to the music, to the spaces in between. At exactly 11:34 a.m., Meredith stepped into the hallway and called. Last performer. Monica Harris. The room stilled. A hush rolled over the competitors. Some smirked. Others looked genuinely curious. Preston offered a mock three-clap round of applause. Monica stood. The legs of her chair scraped the floor with a soft screech. She walked past them, calm, steady. Her heart beat louder than ever, but her steps did not shake. As she entered the small auditorium, 3 judges sat behind a velvet-draped table: Dean Celeste Hanover, the Iron Woman of Stratford's reputation, flanked by a curly-haired professor from Juilliard and a young female theorist known for her critiques on technical perfection. Dean Hanover spoke first. Miss Harris, I see you've chosen to perform an original composition. No sheet music? No. Academic background? I learned from life. The room held still. The other judges exchanged subtle glances. Hanover smiled, tight and polished. Then perhaps the upright piano in the corner would better suit your style. Monica followed her gaze. The upright piano, chipped, slightly out of tune, and used for years, sat in shadow like an afterthought. The message was clear: you are not worthy of the Steinway. She walked to the upright without hesitation. Dean Hanover added, sweetly, if the piano is unsuitable, you're welcome to decline. Monica turned. Her voice, calm but razor-sharp, cut through the room: a piano doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be heard. She sat. Adjusted the bench. Closed her eyes. Then pressed the first key. It was off-key. Dull. Slightly sour. But it sang. Not to impress. Not to prove. But to speak. Her left hand laid the rhythm, slow, heavy, like hospital footsteps at midnight. Her right hand stitched together memories, the jazz bar, the late-night keyboard, the fading voice of her mother. Each note was a scar. Every pause, a breath she had once held. The curly-haired judge leaned forward. The young woman stopped writing. Hanover's fingers, which had been tapping the table, froze. Because what Monica played couldn't be graded. It was raw. Untrained. Uneven. And absolutely undeniable. She played the moment her scholarship was denied. The day her mother died. The startup pitches where she was told, you don't look like a founder. She played the lonely nights with only a keyboard and no one to hear her. She played the silence of a world that had never invited her in. And as she played, something strange happened. The old piano, worn and discarded, seemed to wake up. As if it, too, had waited for this moment. When the final note fell, low, long, and heartbreakingly human, no one moved. One beat. Then 2. Then a single clap. From the curly-haired judge. Then the young woman beside him. Then the back of the room. The applause didn't erupt. It built, like a wave that knew it wasn't just celebrating a performance, but witnessing a truth that couldn't be denied. Dean Hanover stood, slowly. Her voice, though composed, carried a note of challenge. Thank you for your emotional performance. However, this competition requires demonstration of technique and heritage. Perhaps you'd consider a classical piece. Chopin, perhaps. The room froze again. Monica stood, walked back to the piano, rested her hands on its battered surface, and looked directly at Hanover. I didn't come to play what you expect. I came to play what's been silenced. Then she sat again. And this time, she didn't begin softly. She struck the keys with fire. What followed wasn't just music, it was defiance. Her left hand pounded like chains breaking free. Her right danced across keys with a fury that blended gospel, blues, and the raw cry of every forgotten voice. This was no longer a test. It was a revolution. And the room was never the same again. The second time Monica played, it wasn't for validation, it was for resurrection. Her body leaned into the upright piano as if fusing with it. The audience no longer saw a woman who didn't belong. They saw someone commanding a storm, summoning every buried note from her past and bleeding them into every measure. Her music didn't beg to be accepted. It dared anyone to deny it. Behind her, the curly-haired Juilliard professor slowly stood, one hand resting on the velvet table like he needed grounding. His eyes glistened. The young female judge was no longer taking notes. Her hands were clasped together tightly, holding back a reaction she didn't want seen. Even the skeptical students peeking through the hallway door leaned in, breathless. Preston Caldwell, standing with folded arms in the corridor, had stopped smiling. Dean Hanover remained still, but now, her posture was more defense than dominance. Her lips were pressed together not in disdain, but in caution. She had expected imperfection. Instead, Monica had awakened the one thing institutions like Stratford feared most, truth. The melody that flowed wasn't just music, it was testimony. The syncopated rhythm mimicked the late-night clang of a mop bucket echoing through marble halls, Monica's first job in her startup years. The minor chords mourned her mother's last breath. Her right hand's riffs rose in fragments, little gospel lifts and soulful sighs, interruptions, the way real life feels when it's never quite finished. And through it all, Monica looked ahead, not down at the keys. Her eyes weren't reading, they were remembering. Then came the final section, a soft diminuendo that felt like a quiet goodbye. The last few notes didn't plead. They simply existed, like the last flicker of a candle that had burned too long, too hard, in too much wind. She lifted her hands from the keys slowly. No bow. No smile. Just silence. The kind that makes your chest tighten because you know, you've just heard something sacred. No one moved. And then, Jordan Lee clapped from behind the stage curtain. 3 slow, deliberate claps. Then the room erupted. Not with rehearsed courtesy or classical politeness, with something primal. A wave of standing ovation rippled across the space like thunder rolling in from the horizon. Even the students who had whispered earlier now stood, not out of obligation, but awe. Tears shimmered in eyes that didn't know why they were crying, only that something inside them had been called out. The curly-haired professor stepped forward. That, he said, his voice cracking, was not a piece of music. That was a confession. Monica didn't answer. She simply stepped back from the piano, chin high, breath steady. Dean Hanover remained seated. She had not clapped. Her posture remained pristine. But something had shattered in her eyes. Not defeat. Not anger. But the dawning realization that something had passed through this room that her authority couldn't contain. Hanover finally stood. She moved forward with slow, deliberate steps and extended a perfectly manicured hand. Miss Harris, she said, her tone like velvet laced with steel, the Whitmore Invitational values technical merit and historical grounding. Your performance was moving, but do you truly believe emotion alone is enough to justify recognition at this level? Monica met her gaze. I don't play to be recognized. I play because silence was killing me. Hanover blinked. And then, in front of everyone, she stepped back and offered Monica her place on center stage. There was no trophy yet. No winner announced. But the entire auditorium had already decided. As Monica stood in the spotlight, alone, unadorned, with no medals or pedigree, the world tilted. Because for the first time in Stratford's prestigious, exclusive, polished history, a broken piano had told a true story. And the system that had always demanded perfection, had just witnessed power in imperfection. Outside the auditorium, phones were already buzzing. A student had captured the moment on video. A 1-minute, 27-second clip of Monica's performance had already been uploaded. Caption: a black woman with no sheet music, no degree, just soul, and she made the whole room cry. By midnight, the video had hit 3 million views. And by dawn, Monica Harris was not just a CEO. She was a movement. Monica sat at her desk on the 31st floor of Ardium Holdings, a cup of untouched coffee cooling beside her. Her inbox overflowed. NPR. CBS. A TEDx organizer with urgent interest. She scrolled slowly, her eyes skimming past the names, the praise, the invitations. But her mind wasn't on the screen. It was still in that room, the upright piano, the notes, the silence that had followed. That wasn't a performance. It was a resurrection. And now the world wanted a press kit. Her assistant buzzed in over the intercom. Monica. The New York Times is asking for a feature. Title suggestion: the CEO who shattered classical expectations. Should I forward? Monica closed her eyes and sighed. Not now. She stood, walked to the window, and looked out over Boston. Rain misted the skyline. Her reflection blurred in the glass, half businesswoman, half ghost. That afternoon, an email came from Stratford Conservatory. Subject: invitation to open dialogue, non-traditional voices in modern music. Sender: Dean Celeste Hanover. Monica stared at it. 3 days ago, this woman had tried to bury her behind a broken piano. Now she wanted to talk. Attached to the email were additional offers, guest faculty invitations from Berkeley, Juilliard, even the Paris Conservatory. Not to perform. To teach. Monica didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, she took the subway home, her same small apartment with its creaky floors and faded bookshelf. She turned on the chipped Casio keyboard and played. Not for anyone. Just to hear the truth again, out loud. Each note wasn't perfect. A few keys still stuck. But it didn't matter. Because something had shifted. She didn't need a stage. She had found her voice. And it wasn't going back into silence. That evening, she opened her second drawer, the one she hadn't touched in years. Inside, her old scholarship rejection letter. The business registration for her first startup. A faded flyer from the Minor Hill audition she never attended. She placed the wild card application next to them. Then, without hesitation, picked up a pen and wrote something new: Blue Lament, Arrangement 1. She didn't know where this was going. But she knew one thing: it was hers. The next week, she returned to Stratford, this time not through a side door or as a mystery guest. She walked through the front entrance. Students parted like water. Some greeted her with soft, good mornings. Others watched her like a legend come to life. On a frosted glass door of a small studio room, a new nameplate read: Monica Harris, guest faculty, artist in residence. She stood outside it for a long moment. She didn't cry. She just breathed, like someone who'd been holding it in for 30 years. Inside, 20 students waited. Some had watched her play. Some had only seen the video. None knew what kind of lesson was coming. She didn't bring a syllabus. No projector. No handouts. Just herself and the same upright piano, now lovingly restored. She turned to the class and said, I'm not here to teach you how to play like Chopin. I'm here to ask you something no exam ever will. If you had one piece left to play before the world closed in, what would you play? Silence. Then, one hand went up. Then another. Then another. And Monica smiled, not because she had the answers, but because they were finally asking the right questions. The word spread faster than sheet music in a freshman theory class. They called it the studio without permission. No grades. No textbooks. Just a room where students dared to play what had never been scored. Monica didn't correct posture or bark metronome tempos. Instead, she asked questions that peeled back layers. Why did you hesitate there? Or, whose voice are you imitating with that chord? The answers were messy. Emotional. Raw. One student admitted he'd never played without imagining his father judging him. Another said she always transposed to C major because accidentals felt like chaos. A third burst into tears midway through a melody she'd written in secret after her brother's funeral. And Monica simply listened. That was her method, listening. Not to sound, but to soul. Word got out. Students from other disciplines, literature, visual arts, even engineering, started sitting in the back of the room, not to play but to feel something they hadn't touched in years. Soon, the conservatory had to expand her class to the larger rehearsal space. Still, Monica refused to move the upright piano. This is where it began, she said. And this is where it stays. Her classes weren't traditional. Sometimes no one played for the entire hour. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat in silence, until someone's truth dared to break it. One day, a student raised his hand and asked, "How do you know when it's your own voice and not just your fear?" Monica paused, then answered, "When it scares you, but you play it anyway." That quote ended up on a wall of the conservatory's north wing. Meanwhile, the music world outside Stratford was transforming. Articles appeared in The Atlantic, NPR, even Forbes, with titles like, "The CEO Who Taught Conservatories to Listen," and "The Monica Harris Effect." Critics and academics were split. Some said she was dismantling structure with emotional anarchy. Others called her a prophet of the post-classical age. But Monica ignored all of it. She focused on her students, on their scars, their breakthroughs, their courage. One afternoon, she received a handwritten letter from a high school girl in Charlotte. "Miss Harris. I don't know how to read music. I've never taken a class. But when I saw your video, I wrote my first song. I call it Window Light. I play it when no one's home, and the sun hits the floor just right. Thank you. Ariel, age 13. Monica folded the letter and placed it beside her keyboard. She didn't write back. Not yet. Instead, she sat at the upright. And played. Each note whispered a reply, "You don't need permission to begin." It wasn't about technique anymore. Or even legacy. It was about passing the key. Because somewhere in Charlotte, another girl, with no conservatory badge, no sheet music, no audience, had found her voice. And Monica wasn't just opening doors anymore. She was making sure they never closed again. The night of the Whitmore Invitational Grand Finale arrived like thunder rumbling beneath velvet. The grand auditorium at Stratford glowed beneath stage lights. Every red velvet seat filled. But this wasn't a typical crowd. Tonight, journalists, classical critics, students, conservatory brass, and even retired symphony directors sat shoulder to shoulder. They weren't just here for music. They were here for Monica Harris. Her name was whispered like a riddle. Is she really playing again? Wasn't she just a guest artist? No degree, no conservatory background, and she's the finalist. On the program, next to her name, no piece was listed. Just, original composition, title undisclosed. When her name was called, there was no introduction. No preamble. Monica walked out in a long black dress, simple, matte fabric, no sparkle. Her hair in a low bun. A single silver bracelet on her wrist. Her mother's. She sat at the Steinway. This time, not in defiance. Not in rage. but in ownership. She breathed in, slow and full. Then played. The opening note was soft, a whisper asking for permission to exist. The melody grew, each chord a step through her life, the night bus humming under flickering streetlights, her mother's hand tapping on hospital sheets, the crumple of a scholarship denial letter, the hiss of espresso machines in the cafes she once cleaned. But then, the tempo changed. The rhythm swelled. The notes rose not as pleas but declarations. Monica no longer asked the world to listen. She commanded it. Her left hand struck a progression that sounded like chains being thrown off. Her right hand danced in colors no theory class could name. Blues. Gospel. Bittersweet jazz. And in the middle, silence. A full 3 seconds. No note. Just breath. And in that pause, every person in the room leaned forward. Because this wasn't just music. It was freedom. When she played the final note, a low G, held just long enough to ache, she lifted her hands. No bow. No glance toward the judges. Just stillness. Then, a single standing ovation. Then another. Then the entire auditorium. Dean Hanover, seated in the front row, didn't stand. But her eyes shimmered. When Monica stepped forward to receive the Whitmore Grand Prize, the highest honor in the conservatory's history, Hanover handed her the crystal trophy herself. And whispered, "You didn't just win. You rewrote the definition of winning." Monica said nothing. She didn't need to. Because the world already heard her, and once heard, truth doesn't go quiet again. In the weeks that followed, Monica was offered book deals, podcasts, guest lectureships. She declined most of them. Except one. A request from a young girl in Charlotte, North Carolina, asking if she could send her song, Window Light, to be reviewed. Monica said yes. And on her desk, next to a fresh stack of letters from new students, she placed the sheet, hand-drawn staff lines, childish script, a melody barely a page long. She sat at her upright piano, placed her fingers gently on the keys, and played Ariel's song. Not to perfect it. Not to critique it. Just to listen. Because that's what Monica Harris had become. Not a star. Not an expert. Not a symbol. But a listener of the unspoken. A breaker of locks. A door held open. For everyone still waiting to be heard. Have you ever felt like the world decided who you were before you had a chance to speak? Monica Harris didn't just play music. She told the story of every voice that was once silenced. She shattered expectations, not with credentials, but with courage. And now, the stage is no longer just for the accepted. It's for the authentic. What about you? If you had one piece left to play, no grading, no applause, what would you play? Tell us in the comments. Because here at True Echo, we believe your story matters. If this journey moved you, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who's still waiting to be heard, and subscribe to True Echo, where real voices rise. Because sometimes, one song from the heart can change everything.